So before we actually store this stuff into the database, what I want to do is create a new URL for individual questions themselves. So like when you want to see this question, you'll see it. If you want to see another question, you'll see that one instead. It's fairly easy to do to make this URL, but the reason for it, or the purpose for having this URL in the first place, is so we can also have various URLs that they can see and thus various questions that they can answer all the time. So let's go ahead and make this URL first. I'm going to go into my views because I want to create the view itself. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this home view, and I'm just going to paste it above. We'll worry about home later, but for now, we'll just keep it in there because we will change it at some point in the future. So I'm going to add in a parameter of ID. So this ID is going to be related to the instance that we're going to be working with, right? So the actual object that we want from this specific question, right? So any particular question that we have, that's what we're going to be doing with. So, and this I'll give the view, I'll call it single. So it's basically going to be a single question. So now that we have this, we can go into our urls.py and we can copy the question URL itself. And right above it, I'm going to make a new one. And this is going to take in an argument as well. And we'll call it question single as the name. All right, so designing URLs is a fairly common task that you'll end up doing. And since that's the case, we created a guide to help you understand these Django URLs, or at least common regular expressions for them. Regular expressions can be a little bit confusing to understand exactly, so we're not going to go into them specifically, but I do want to show you at least how you can use some of the common URL regular expressions that you'll see in your projects. Now, what we've already seen is like the context and about. So if you take a look at our GitHub repository for guides, you'll see the common URL regex is the markdown that we would be using. So if you look at this URL patterns here, we see that we have contact, about, profile, and then we have this username. So what this is doing is it's looking for a username, and it's going to fit a particular format, and then it's going to pass that username into our view itself. So if I scroll down a little bit, you'll also see an object ID one. So in this case, regular expression, you can say an order or just ID. This regular expression here only accepts an integer as a parameter. So basically that means that you can pass 10 and it will work, but if you pass ABC, it will not work. It will fail as the regular expression. So that's something that's really cool about it. So let's actually see that in action here in just a second. So first of all, you want to do $P, and then we're going to set the parameter to be an ID, and then we'll do just /d plus, lowercase d plus. So just like what you see here, it's this right here, and this is giving us that new digit. So we're gonna check this in just a second, but I want to make sure single is also accepting that ID as a parameter. So if we go back into our views, we have it as a parameter in here too. So this parameter can now be used throughout our actual single page. So I'm going to go ahead and print ID here. So this is printing this ID specifically. So let's look at this view now that we have it back in our home, and I'm just going to add 123 here. So it goes and it shows me 123. It actually prints out 123. And notice it's still the same exact thing that's going on, and that's only because everything else hasn't changed, right? We just added this new ID here, or this new parameter that's actually coming through. But really, if the question does not exist, we should probably raise some sort of error. And we have this HTTP 404 here. This is actually the incorrect import, so it's actually from Django.http import HTTP 404. All right, so there's another error that we want to do. So now that we've got this ID, we can raise this error, right? So if the ID, or if that question does not exist in our database, we can raise that error. So that means we could do something like this. Let's go ahead and grab the questions itself. So we'll say instance equals to question.objects.get ID equals to ID. And this is going to, well, I'll take it out of the try block first and just show you what that does. So, and I'll get rid of this print statement. So this is an instance that we're trying to grab. Now this, at first glance, looks like it could work. So if I go in here, I get this error. It says does not exist. So if this is the case, we could put it in the try block, and this is going to try whether or not it actually works or it's there. And if it's not there, we can raise the HTTP 404, right? So I can refresh, and now it's doing this 404 error. Now, of course, if it is there, so if I went to question ID of 1, it'll actually show it because that question is actually there. So this is cool, but there's actually a faster way to do this as well. It's called get underscore object underscore or 404. So get object or 404 is saying this exact same thing. So the object, of course, being whatever the model is. You can use this for all sorts of things. So now what we'll do is instead we'll say an instance equals to get object or 404. So now we do the class or the model itself, so question, and then the parameter that we want to pass, which in this case it's ID equals to ID. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. Okay, and now I'm going to put this instance, I'm actually going to put it down here where this instance was. So now we have a way to get the question object itself. So there's a lot of different things that you could do here. You could also do text equals to, some of the text that we've seen before. Like if the model itself has a field with this text and there's only one of them, this will actually bring it back. But we're going to do ID is equal to ID. So this is a get call. It's going to the database looking for the ID that relates to this question. Now, something about models, if you don't know it already, basically every model already by default has an ID in here. That's a Boolean field, and it automatically increments. And this is also known as the primary key. You don't have to worry about that at this point, but basically what you should know is every model has an ID no matter what. You don't have to explicitly say it. It's built into the Django models in general. Okay, cool. So now that we've got this, let's go back into our single. And now if we do this again, and we try to go to a different number, it doesn't work. And if I do ABC, it also doesn't work because it doesn't match that regular expression. So that also means that I can have another URL that is specifically just for characters, letters, and numbers together, right? So you'd actually change the way you use your regular expression. And that's something that you can play around with here. You could also use a slug, so like a slug field like this. You can do all sorts of things there. But that's not what we're going to do. The point of this was really to make a view that has a single question, and then after we answer that question, it gives us a different one. It goes to a new question. So to do this, it's fairly easy. I'm going to set it equal to a variable called nextQ, as in next question, and we'll just do question.objects.order by, and I'll just put question mark and then first. So what this is doing is it's saying order by random, so that question mark is actually random, and you can use this anytime. So if you did a dot filter and then you wanted to say like title I contains this would get all of the question objects that have a title, or sorry, not title, but text, because we're using text as one of our fields. So text contains and then it'll order them by random, and then it'll grab that first one. But just by getting rid of that, it's just going to getting all of the objects. But for us, we'll just say .all, and then we'll order by random, and then we're going to grab that first item. And since we have this, we can actually redirect our questioning to that. So there's one more thing I want to bring in, and that's the redirect shortcut. So here, after the question's asked and we do some stuff with the text, we have our next question, and we're going to return a redirect to that next question, which first of all, we want to use the URL name, which is question single. So we're using this URL name here. Go back in here. So use URL name and then ID equals to nextQ.id. So ID, of course, being related to the same parameter here. And what this will do is it'll allow us to redirect to that next single page. So let's go back into our questions. I'll go to question 1, and then I'll say, yes, it is, and hit save and continue. It takes me to question 2, as you see as the URL up here, and I can say true. And it might take me back to question 2 because it's going by random. But in this case, we only have 2 questions, so the randomness is not really that important. The next part we might want to think about is maybe redirecting the user here if they've already answered that next question, which we still haven't figured out what they have answered, and we haven't saved any of that stuff. So that's actually what we need to do now. So if you have any questions on this, let us know. Otherwise, let's keep going.